Hello and welcome to the Green Room. I'm David Pearl and I'm here in Glasgow. Sunny, well it was sunny Glasgow, it's more sort of a bit murky now, but I'm here because I don't know about you, but I'm having eco-anxiety. I'm known as a bit of an expert in story and I'm having difficulty with the narratives, the big narratives that are flying around that are associated with climate change, global warming, environmentalism. It seems at one end of the spectrum, I've got the environmentalists trying to wake me up about the terrifying apocalypse that's about to happen. And at the other end of the scale, I've got the vested interests trying to put me back to sleep, saying it's all too late, there's nothing I can do. And sleeping is what I'm not doing. I'm waking up in the middle of the night and frankly, really anxious. So I can't handle the story, so I've come up here to find the people that can. The activists, the people taking action, the narrative ninjas, if you will. I want to learn what they're doing so I can do a bit more of it. Unfreeze myself, take action and take some of the fear of the future and turn it into shaping what happens, making it a better world. Behind me you will see Glasgow laid out in all its glory. In the distance you'll see the SECC, which is where COP26 is happening. The main stage is there, that's where the celebs are, where decisions are supposed to be made. That's where Greta Thunberg says there's a lot of the blah, blah, blah. We're not going there, no, we're going backstage. It's the Green Room after all. We're going to talk to some of the people in the know. We're going to ask them to take off their shoes, take off the mask and tell us how it really is. So let's go to the studio. Now I asked for a film studio, but Andrew got me a yoga studio. There's not much space here in Glasgow at the moment, so we're going to have to make this work. Come with me. So welcome to the Green Room, or what will be the Green Room. Thank you, Patrick. We are transforming the top floor of a yoga studio, the Yoga Extension in downtown Glasgow, into a film studio. That's our producer, Andrew, who's transformed into plant man for the day. He's bringing in some live foliage, very appropriate for COP26. You've met Patrick, our sound man. Over there is Zach, one of our runners, and our director of photography, Jordan. Say hello. So the Green Room. The idea is we're going to create a haven, a place where some of the movers and shakers can unhook from the hurly-burly of COP26. Come here, kick off their shoes. Well, they have to take their shoes off. It's a yoga studio, right? But also take off the mask, the professional mask, chill out and tell us what's really going on. Let me give you a taste of some of the people you're going to meet, the guests who've been gracious enough to answer my cry for help. You're going to meet activists, scientists, connectors, facilitators, disruptors, campaigners, negotiators, regenerators, pioneers. Before we're done, we're going to have met woolly pigs, danced on the Camino de Santiago, turned sandals into seacraft, and dug holes in the ground just to enjoy the smell of the soil. We'll find out what gets our guests up in the morning and how they sleep at night, so we can all learn. So the first question I asked everybody was, tell me your story in 30 seconds. The world out there is busy and attention's scarce, and I was really curious to see how these people managed to sort of in a short time grab people's attention. It's a hard thing to do when you've got a lot to say, but not hard if you're a scientist, come broadcaster, come top speaker. How did Gabriel get from school, infant school, to here?
In 30 seconds.
Well, 30 seconds or less.
Very, very simple. First of all, everyone tried to make me specialise. They all said you have to choose one thing and not another thing, right? So my entire so-called academic career was an exercise in sort of musical chairs where I tried to lie on all the subjects. They took away one chair and I lay on all the other ones. So you have to choose. It has to be arts or sciences. It has to be humanities or it has to be music. Right? And I wanted it all. And that actually brought me in the end to climate change because first of all, by fascination, it goes into your head. Like, if you don't understand all of it, you don't understand any of it. You have to know how the atmosphere and the ice and the oceans and everything connect together, right? And then you have to understand how all the different bits of the economy connect together and all the different players and how everything happens. It's fascinating, it's in your head. Then it goes in your heart, it's exciting. And then it goes in your gut and you realise how serious it is and you have to do something about it. And then it goes in your soul. When it's in your soul, there is no power on God's earth that will get it back out again. you're stuck with it, and that's 30 seconds.
Well, I think part of my story is the story of a African woman who was born in the space where I was deeply connected with nature, and with the stories of my ancestors, who flew to North America for university and went on to get her PhD in academia. And so I hold the knowledge systems of the West and the knowledge systems of my ancestors. And so my work is about bridging both. How are we going to disrupt how we feed the world by 2030? And so it's really about how do I help bring about an era of inclusive innovation where all knowledge systems count, so that our collective intelligence really allows us to harness planetary intelligence, so that we all live our interconnectedness more fully, and so that change is easier for all of us working together.
I feel terrible. I cannot allow that on my watch, right? And that's how I felt, exactly like that. I had to do something about this, but just turning off the lights or recycling just wasn't going to cut it anymore, you know. So what could we do? What could I do? You know, I'm this new mother at home. I've got my baby that's crying. You know, I'm not even in an office. What am I supposed to do where I am? And I have to also say here, I've always admired people like Greenpeace activists, you know, upsetting the rainbow warrior. Oh my goodness, I mean, that was they were the coolest people. I sort of wished I could be there. And like, God, you must be so gutsy. I mean, such superheroes, in my view, you know, absolutely the coolest people. And, but they weren't me, you know, I wasn't the superhero upsetting the rainbow warrior. And in fact, here was a sort of mother firmly grounded. But of course, you then think about what you can do, and you realize, well, you've got a computer. So the first thing you can start with is writing to, you know, businesses, politicians, etc. So using the power of the word.
So I'm from Derby, from Derbyshire. Did my time in London, came back, got introduced by good old Tim Smith to a group of uber cool 20-somethings doing allotments. Wouldn't have happened in our day. Our day would have been the good life, and we'd watch it on TV, and that'd be a bit
Sending it up.
Yeah. Down to Earth Derby is going from allotments and 20, 30-somethings growing their own food in cities. This is not people who live in the country already.
Yeah.
Beginning to develop that, to then taking people from cities onto rambles into the Peak District, etc., and seeing the benefit, mental health, social impact, growing your own food. And guess what? Apparently it's cool. And we're going to scale this, and my role is to help them scale it. And where it's going to scale to is from allotments and great ramblings, which is great at a micro level, right through to regenerating the city of Derby.
Well, there's this lovely saying that I caught on the back of a door in some weird place in America, which said, despite all our best endeavours, we rely on 6 inches of soil and the fact that it rains.
One thing that really struck me listening to people's stories was it's not just the content of the story, but it's the way they tell them that really makes an impact. Just look at the amount of sunshine that pours out of Ben Morrison as he's talking about his project, FlipFloppy.
I'm so chuffed that it made you smile, because that's our intention, I guess. By design, we've tried to be positive, and you have to be really disciplined, because there's some horrible stuff around environmental challenges right now. In 2018, we built the world's first sailing boat made entirely from already used plastic. We built it in Lamu in Kenya, and we built it completely using local ingredients, local know-how, local expertise, a local boat design. That was really key. Local trash, so we collected from beach cleanups. It was all sort of already used plastic. It weighs 10 tons. It's about 10 meters long. And if you and I really wanted to, David, we could probably sail from Lamu to the UK in it. We could cross an ocean with a few modifications. So it's the real deal. It's a proper viable sailing boat. So why we're called the FlipFloppy is when you do a beach cleanup in Kenya and actually many parts of the world, the biggest thing by volume that you find is flip-flops. They are indestructible. They're brightly colored. About 3 billion people on planet Earth, you've just proven it, own flip-flops or their equivalent sliders. Everyone's got a pair or has had a pair. So the boat is covered in these flip-flops that we've picked up, that we've glued together, that look a bit like that behind me. You just cut them into squares. And the brilliant thing about them, no matter how old and UV degraded, if you just sort of rub them with a bit of sandpaper, they come up bright. So it's really positive, it's really cheerful. And the idea behind this sort of external part of the boat is it makes you smile. And that's the one thing you can do that captures anyone, no matter what their age, language, background, anything. So we've got a brilliant start point for a conversation there.
So when I talk to these climate champions, these brilliant people doing brilliant things, I get frustrated because it seems so self-evidently right what they're trying to do. So what's getting in the way? And they talk about obviously this political resistance and this financial difficulties and this complexity, systemic problems. But I often think that behind that there are these stories that we're telling ourselves, these big stories that are kind of pushing back. So what are the stories that are getting in their way, and what can we do about them?
Me, the big story I'm up against is a model of innovation that's hierarchical and that excludes and that is elitist and that is disconnected from traditional wisdom, science, and knowledge.
So the story is kind of innovation has got to be this shaped and it's got to have a man on the top probably.
Yes.
And there's a whole process, but it's not grassroots innovation. Is that what you mean?
No. For me, the type of innovation that I see gets supported, empowered, and fueled with money, resources, is often a type of innovation that rewards the ivory towers that are the most powerful in the world, and that dismisses voices that are on the ground that still hold in them centuries of ancestral knowledge. And that disconnect for me is a lost opportunity to truly live our digital age that is all about our interconnectedness.
If I am a young man in Kenya and I'm on a date with somebody, I will be in a car probably that I'll be able to, I've got access to finance. I can get a car where 20 years ago I couldn't. And you know what? I would wind down the window and I would drink my bottle of water and I would throw it out the window in a deliberate, ostentatious show of I've arrived. I'm a consumer now. So this is the emerging consumer populations are the ones that we need to communicate. And it's incredibly challenging and it's incredibly important not to be patronizing. We, as a developed world, we have had the starter, the main course, and the dessert of this amazing thing called plastic. It's so usable, cheap. It's developed our economies and all those things. And now, just as some other parts of our world are just starting to develop from a consumer economies, how dare we go, oh, you guys, we don't want you to start with that. So there's some complexity in how we as a global community have this conversation. We can't just go, no, you can't do that now. We've got to be really nuanced and thoughtful.
I think language, as you know from your field, is so powerful. And the English language is a marvelous thing, but it also can discredit and denigrate. And I think that becomes then a real barrier. So if you talk about soil as dirt, or contractor with a sort of jolly tone says, let's do the muck away, and you go, I'm sorry, muck away? It's not muck away. This is one of the most important critical infrastructures of the planet, and we're talking about muck away. So it comes from ignorance, it comes from a misunderstanding, or really no one ever pointed it out in the first place. You know, it's not, people aren't doing it on purpose. If only we had ecology as a core curriculum subject at schools from the age of five, we'd all be fine. I'm no doubt about that. But there is a disconnect with nature, and the most fundamental aspect of life on Earth, terrestrial life, is soil. But it is so silently doing what it's doing. It's so quiet. It's so undemanding in a sense. The understanding of its total biodiversity, and I'm sure a handful of soil has more microbes than there are people on this earth. If you pick it up and if you smell it, you don't need to send it to a lab to know whether it's healthy, because like degraded soil is no good. Soils were not designed by God to be farmed, to be worked. Soils were designed to hold life.
I think one size all solutions thinking is my biggest bugbear, beliefs that the technological world will save us from ourselves, but without addressing rapid consumption. Things around green energy are really complicated, and they're not just the ultimate solutions. There's actually a lot of nuance that has to be addressed with regard to what are green energy solutions, what kind of resources are they extracting, who are they, which people are they displacing, what does that mean for the life on Earth and the biodiversity that they're upending when they're coming in. So I get really tired of the kind of big picture, we got this mentality, when actually, no, we don't really got this. So I'd rather see some honesty coming to the fore, and then creating those dialogues where we have different people represented who are living these experiences and actually have a huge amount to offer, but aren't being championed or amplified. So I think that those meta narratives, of which are still the sort of dominant Western approach to doing, that we know that they're kind of destroying us, but somehow we still can't get out of them. We're still utilizing them, and just thinking, well, if we're tokenistic about how we change it up, then that's going to fix it somehow. But actually, we need to completely turn the table.
So if there are these big, beastly pushback stories, what's the antidote? How do our guests negotiate their way through this resistance, find their way through to the light on the other side?
The thing that nobody's ready for is what's going to happen, because middle-aged men are 99% wrong on everything. And what I find hilarious, first of all, is most people don't seem to know much about trees. They don't understand that human society is like a tree. Do you know what a tree does in the year before it dies? It effloresces. It flowers like buggery because it knows it's dying. Why do you think you've had right-wing politics make an ascendancy all over Europe and South America, and indeed in the USA for a good few years before Biden? It's because the threat of change produces this kind of inchoate roar to be as things are, and and better still, to be as it once was, because as it was is something we dream existed, but it never existed. So I see the world in a state of complete flux, going to somewhere amazing, really amazing, and our duty is to make sure that that transition happens at a speed which does not leave revolution in its wake and prevent all those marvelous things happening. I feel like the guy in a record company, has some heavy metal bands, are number one in the album charts. But my A&R guys have spotted this movement of music that's coming towards us, which is going to fill the gap. It could be punk, it could be, Britpop or whatever. So in my case, I'm fascinated by what's happening with clean meat, which has gone from nowhere to 1.8 billion turnover last year. It will double this year. China's about to enter the fray. I'm fascinated by fermentation technology, which is extraordinary, so that you can actually get to a situation where you are fermenting from clean air, supposedly clean air, proteins that will make dairy, for example, 30% of the cost of dairy from a cow. And people say, oh, how's that possible? And I say, go and see a tree in a pot Have you ever seen a big tree in a pot? And they go, yes, of course I have. And you go, where do you think it feeds from? Just that soil? Madman? No, it's eating sunlight and it's eating proteins in the air. Now, fermentation technology is unbelievable. Let me tell you how unbelievable it is. It means that with this technology, every society on earth will be able to produce food cheaply. The stranglehold of the West and the big agricultural companies on food will go. It will go. The same with the production of medicines. The same with transport, which the prices will just cascade down. At root, what is going to happen, as you know, we have deep geothermal energy at Eden. We're in the process of getting it. By the middle of next year, we'll be completely independent on renewables. You're going to be in a situation where all over the world, you'll stop seeing countries with centralized energy, with centralized food systems for distribution, with centralized knowledge. The internet, I think, is just gone past its irritating adolescent phase and is about to become very, very useful. And then when you see these LEOs, the low altitude satellite systems, you're going to be able to monitor biodiversity on Earth. You're going to be able to make people wherever they are connected, but they're going to not be connected. You see, the thing is, the old farts think that that's going to give them, the center, more and more power. It's not. You're going to see Britain fragment into a federal state. You're going to see every country in Europe become federal states. Centralized power is going to wither on the vine because it will have no purpose. It will just have no purpose. And you will not be wanting to have wars either because it's just an irritating annoyance.
Yeah, well, the climate leaders we need are already there. I've met them. You could meet them too. I think we just need to create funding mechanisms and systems to support them. So it's a bottom-up thing. People that are in their own community, they are deeply connected to what's needed, and they're very incentivized to want to do it, intrinsically and every other way. So they're there. So finding ways to channel funding support for adaptation or other things in the communities that really need it, you see those shifts. When I sit and I talk to women who are creating fully organic farms with zero support, it makes me really angry. But they could get support for fertilizers that are not good for the soil for free. And so I think we need totally new funding mechanisms that can support that. And we just want people to understand this, and to be saying, okay, let's be innovative. If we're going to give some money to an organization, maybe we can find ways that it's going to get closer to the ground. Because I think that's where adaptation happens, right? You can't say, here's what we need to do, here's a thing we're going to switch.
When you say Africa needs, I believe Africa doesn't necessarily need, but somebody's got to pay for the wrongs that they're doing, for the contribution to damage. So if you're damaging the environment, you have to pay for it because we're living in a global space. So whatever you do from Glasgow will be born by somebody maybe in Malawi, in Zambia, or in Zimbabwe. And we're just saying pay for it. But instead of just paying for it, you're not necessarily being asked to pay for it. You are helping. You are helping to improve or bring to intensify or expand on the adaptation methods that are being applied. Because from an African perspective, it's organic to preserve nature. That's how I view it.
So first of all, I've been working on climate change for nearly 30 years, and I found out a little while ago, a couple of years ago, something that really shocked me, and it became worse and worse until the beginning of this year I realised I had to do something about it. And what I found out that shocked me was we cannot now get down to net zero by 2050, this target that we're trying to get to. We can't stay below 1.5 degrees, this target we're trying to get to, with all the means that we're currently trying. We have left it too late. In addition to everything else that we do, we're going to have to take carbon dioxide, the pollutant that's causing all this problem, back out of the sky and put it somewhere safe. And we're going to have to do a lot. So all the scenarios that are starting to come out are saying that we will need billions of tons of CO2 taken out of the sky in the next couple of decades. So at the moment, we're doing it for maybe a million or two. So that's a real problem. And that really worried me. And then I started thinking about it and realizing there's a much more heartening reason why if we get behind carbon removals taking the CO2 back out of the sky, we can actually not just stop the problem getting worse, we can start to make it better. We can actually clean up our own mess, and we can give the world a chance to heal. And that is just a magical story. So thinking about carbon removals, I was like, okay, well, what is this thing? How do you do it? And you talk to people about it, and some people say, oh yeah, trees. I love trees. And other people say, oh yeah, big machines. No, I don't like big machines. Big futuristic machines, techno wizards. They're all the crazy people. They don't want to fix nature. They just want, and it just goes, whoa, off we go again. Another this versus that, us versus them. And nature versus tech, green versus chrome. And then there's also this issue about if you do removals, then you won't do the reductions. So you can't do And it's like, can we please grow up and know that we have to do both? My mum was always telling me when I was a kid, and I go, like, which is better, mine or my brother's? And she'd say, I think they're both nice. No, but which is better? And right now, we can't do it without both. So those two things, the kind of reductions versus removals and the green versus chrome.
That's beautiful.
It's just nonsense, actually. It turns out, you can store carbon in the earth, you can store it in trees, you can store it in soils, you can store it in ocean chemistry, you can store it in buildings, you can store it in clothes, you can store it in rocks, you can store it in geological formations deep underground, and probably other places we haven't thought of yet. And that means we can take it back out of the sky and store it in all these places and actually fix the problem. How cool is that?
That's amazing. So you've made my brain go several times. So when you said green versus chrome, I thought, God, I do that. So suddenly thinking, no, it's green and chrome.
My urgency right now is connecting to all those who are ready around the world and supporting them and supporting each other. So we accelerate, and so that we're not working in islands of knowledge, but we're interconnecting all of those. Because for some people, it's going to take time. They're going to have to see it to believe it. And so part of it, for example, like in Africa or India, is as we adopt regenerative agriculture, people see that a soil that was bare, that there's butterflies, that there are bees, that there are worms in the soil, that no matter what climate event happens, the soil is resilient, that the crops are resilient. So for some people, they're going to have to see it. And so this is why my work with people in artificial intelligence and data metrics is so important, because some will need the data to believe it. Some are visionaries, and they will vision and live the image before it happens. And so it's important to respect where people are and not force it. And so also part of it for me is working with the ecology of systems in terms of, let me work with everybody who gets it so we collectively accelerate the movement. So for those who don't get it, that they can live the images that we are creating and get excited about being part of something they didn't even know was possible.
It's like someone said to me the other week, who's a dancer, he said, you just need to get the front row.
Yeah.
And the rest of the audience starts applauding and is really in.
I love it.
And so in a way, for me, it's who has got the story, and how do you make them really light up with because it's their vision too.
And not just that, but also the saints and sinners story, the good guys and the bad guys. And the thing is that, definitely there are people who have behaved egregiously throughout this whole process of how we've got to where we are on climate change. And there are some people who have deliberately tried to stop any progress that's been happening. And a few of those are actually, I think, evil. But relatively few. I think it's surprisingly few people wake up in the morning thinking, what can I destroy today? And many of the rest of them are kind of stuck in this pattern where either the system around them kind of forces them or encourages them or incentivizes them, or they don't see it because they're not talking to people who think anywhere differently from the way that they do. So the magic of it is when you can connect them, you can use stories to connect them to people who don't think the way that they do in a way that they enjoy. Then you can make them feel safe enough, to feel comfortable enough for long enough that they start to go, maybe it could be different.
So one thing that's becoming very clear as I talk to more people up here is that there is a whole group of humans, a large, vast group of humans, that are sort of being pushed back by a narrative that says that they can't lead, they shouldn't have a voice, and in a way they don't really exist. And they're called women. listen to what Bianca's got to say about this.
That was last year when the UK, which is the host country, announced their leadership team for COP, and there wasn't a single woman on it. And we thought, that's rather peculiar. I mean, we're in 2021. You know, I'm surrounded by these amazing women leading on all sorts of topics. You know, I've got a network of CEOs and founders of charities and foundations, you know, politicians, scientists, and so on, who have been leading work all along. Why on earth, how on earth can they have been overlooked when the team was chosen, particularly because in the UK we have some fantastic female climate leaders. You know, there's just a complete lack of understanding what we're actually talking about. We're talking about 50% of the world's population not even being nearly represented equally at the negotiating tables. If you look at the research that says if you have, for example, if a country has more female parliamentarians, the country has better climate policy and policy implementation. The same is true for boards. So for example, on disclosure, boards perform better if they have more women on them. And the latest research shows indeed that you also have better climate policy and implementation there as well. So, and we know from diversity studies that, you know, if you have women on teams, the outcomes are simply better. Peace negotiations, for example, perform way better with women on them. You know, there's better implementation. They're more likely to ratify in international environmental treaties. They're more likely to vote for protected habitat areas and so on. So, you know, how on earth we couldn't look at even this qualitative difference that women make when you bring them onto teams is beyond me, given that we are in a climate emergency today. Scientists say that by 2030, if we don't change course rapidly, by 2030 we will be in a state of permanent climate chaos. You know, we need to do everything we can to bring new vision in, because, you know, 26 years now we've had these negotiations. Emissions are still rising. Well, clearly something's not working. I mean, you know, a child could tell you that. And we know women haven't been present. We know they lead to better outcomes. So what easier, you know, what better tool for acceleration of climate action than bringing women on board? You know, it's the simplest thing. I ask, you know, would you sail the world with one eye firmly patched up? Particularly if you know that patchy waters lie ahead. No, you wouldn't, you know, because the chances of crashing your boat are too high. And this is exactly the situation we're in. So we're in difficult territory here. We've been sailing with one eye firmly patched up, and now it's time to take off that patch to get full vision of what's around us, full vision, and then decide how to proceed. You need to do this as a team, 50-50 vision, you know, the men, the women together.
Imagine you had in front of you a man who doesn't know and is scared, and you do, by the way. What advice would you, a woman, have for me when I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, scared, worried about the future, feeling frozen a little bit, that I can't do anything, that really, whatever I may say during the working day, whatever confidence I might bring, it's a mask, but underneath it there's deep fear. Anything you could, any advice? What's your guidance?
I'd say, trust us. All will be well. Yeah?
Okay. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah, I got that. You know, so it's said that all good stories need a baddie, right? You need a sort of nemesis or a worthy adversary, someone or something to be up against, and generate lots of energy in the story. And I don't know if you've noticed, but in the environmental narrative, there's a lot of fingers pointing at, you know, the wealthy, the establishment, big business, and so on. I just wondered, you know, is it true that there are these corporate bosses who are hard-hearted, hard-nosed, and actually want to see the world go to rack and ruin? Or is there another story? Let's see.
There is a big problem with leaders in this space who are paralysed in fear, because they're human beings, right? And they're leading these companies, but they know they've got to completely transform the business. They've got to do that and keep this. all the other stakeholders happy, they've got to keep the shareholders happy, etc. So what we kind of figured was that actually this is a human story. This is a story that goes, don't give me another 197-page deck. I don't need that. Give me some wisdom from people that are 5 years ahead. Give me a breakfast with a peer that's just going to say, do this, but don't do that. We did that, it was rubbish. And the problem with that is that if you are a leader and you're frankly crapping yourself because you've got climate here, you've got Black Lives Matter coming from this direction, oh, by the way, you've got a virus. Where do you start? So no deck is going to sort that out. No learning from the past is really going to sort that out. These are journeys that people are going on, that they need to be allowed to make mistakes. But far better that you do that from somebody who's sort of made a similar mistake already than trying to drag something out from some consultancy in the past.
We need to start developing between ourselves, you, me, and a couple of other people, a narrative which isn't about pinning people like butterflies into a case. It's allowing ourselves to say, okay, we got to change, but actually to change, you can't just today say we're going to stop all this, because it will actually create enormous hardship, but actually it will also fracture supply chains everywhere. But we need to actually moderate it and be very mindful of all the people who've got careers in those businesses, that we need to find an encouraging way of moving them. For example, all the great guys at BP who are marvelous engineers and project managers and administrators, we're not saying that they're baby eaters. We're saying now, how's about you stop pumping out oil, but you start doing deep geothermal and do that for the nation and make the nation energy independent that way. And all the pensioners who've got shares in BP, that's fine. They'll get them out of geothermal and all the rest of it. I think we've got to be really careful that we're kind to each other at this point, because if we're kind and mindful to each other, we then won't have these ridiculous lesions caused by whole sets of vested interests feeling thwarted.
Shipping, boring industry, B2B, no one thinks about it. Emissions the same as Germany, quite a big deal, all burning oil, dirty oil, right? So you start seeing governments committing to green shipping corridors, and 19 governments saying we'll build the infrastructure and make sure. You see some of the world's biggest cargo owners like Unilever and IKEA and Amazon saying from 2040 we'll only buy zero carbon freight services. And then you have 200 companies along the whole value chain, so fuel manufacturers, port infrastructure, shipping builders, cargo operators, all committing to the same pathway. So and so you've got governments, cities, ports, fuel operators, big FMCG companies, all suddenly starting to fly in the same direction. So it's much safer. There's beautiful pictures of herring shoaling. It's safer, right? Or all the wildebeest, all the canoes migrating together, all giving birth at the same time, right? A lot of them get, killed by predators, but the fact that they're all together and all doing it at the same time means it's much less risky. So yeah, we definitely see that starting to happen. Whereas in the past, and investors as well. So you've got investors, bankers, supply side, demand side, technology, cities, and of course citizens are demanding faster. So everybody's starting to go in the same direction.
So one of the things that's always interested me is the micro story. Stories don't need to be long. They can be very concise. In fact, I'm coming to think that you can tell a story in just one or two words. Like climate change is a story, which is different to global warming. Yeah. These micro stories, I think, are the way that we build up in little tiles. We build up our picture of the world, our model of the world. And so I asked our guests to give us what are some of the micro stories that they encounter.
I was just thinking you're talking about micro stories. I just wrote down 4 micro stories that are really unhelpful. One is the what I call the gloom overwhelm. Like, we're so fucked, we should just prepare for a life in the woods kind of thing. That story consigns future generations to an awful life because it abdicates from action to try and do something today.
How many times have you heard the phrase, what's your carbon footprint? Well, do you know where that phrase came from? It was commissioned by British Petroleum in order to come up with a phrase that we're all in it together. What's your carbon footprint? What's your carbon footprint?
Then there's the conspiracy blah 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 narrative, which is a lie. It says you must tell the truth, and then it says no one's doing anything, or you must tell the truth and it's all bullshit, or you must tell the truth and everyone's relying on offsets. So it fails on its first principle. It fails to live up to its first principle, and there's a lot of that conspiracy blah blah blah. I know people I know saying, the UK government or Nigel Topping, why have you invited so many oil executives to Glasgow? I'm like, hello, didn't invite any. Didn't see any. There might have been a few there. There's definitely a lot of oil people there because there are some petro states, and it's a multilateral process, and countries can bring who they want in there. Good luck overturning the entire basis of multilateral process and law. That's the reality. There are countries who rely on law on oil for income.
Soils that have worms, that have fungi, that have insects can hold 50 times more water than soils that have been polluted and have no microbial life in them anymore and have lost the counts of insects and worms in them. And so what we need are soils that have resilience, that are sponges. Today, most of the cost around climate change are coming through floods. We've seen those images, terrible images around the world of flooded cities, of flooded spaces. And those costs are really related to how are we designing our human societies? How are we interacting with nature to keep soil alive?
So those are the sort of on the it's so bad side. Then there's the predatory delay, like all we need is, the world to put a big fat carbon price on, and we're really supportive of that, pretending to be for things which won't happen.
If you give value to anything, stuff happens. And so what we wanted to show by building a boat was already used plastic. We can build a boat that's got value as a creative sort of art object. It's got value as something you go fishing in or take tourists in or travel in. So it's not really about the boat. It's about the fact that we are able to recycle or reuse and create something of value. If you can demonstrate that at any level, it could be a really small level. It could be making a souvenir out of, recycling something, but we're making people appreciate that it has value.
And then there's the kind of smug, business is here now, we've got it, don't worry kids, governments are shit, but the big boys have arrived. Those are sort of two stories on that give no agency, and two stories that take agency away by pretending that we've got it.
Nature is resilient if we would let it be. And the other aspect is, in terms of opening people's eyes, is composting, because it is like black gold. You take your waste, as long as it's good quality waste, it's just kind of vegetable leftovers and stuff. You put it into a hot rotter or something like that, and then it comes back in its soil, and it is quite a magical thing. And I do believe that when we have the young people and we get them to put their hands in the soil, in the beginning they're very, very nervous, and then after a while it becomes joyful.
Welcome to the open air, the outside world, Glasgow's West End, I believe it's called. And there's nature, look, how lovely. It's hard not to feel optimistic. Beautiful. And it makes me think about these extraordinary people we're talking to, and to wonder really, do they ever feel despair? Do they feel like giving up? And when they do, what narratives do they tell themselves to find their way through the complexity and sort of back to the energy and to the light?
I mean, I would say it's not in the small hours, it's in the middle of the day that I find despair. I mean, no, you go and sit with some Indigenous leaders who tell you about their story, and if you don't cry, you're not human. You go and sit with some farmers who are so frustrated that they've been forced to behave in a certain way because of their obsession with cheap food above all else. Or you sit with some young people who are like, young women who are like, I'm not going to have a kid. I don't want to bring, I mean, how can you not sit with that and get really angry, or it's happening now, right? Just think about it.
Yeah.
And then you see amazing young people moving into politics, or moving into engineering, or moving into law, or you see farmers organizations now working with big companies to transform towards regenerative agricultural practices, or you see engineers in the shipping industry getting excited. So I think the trick is not to fall on those are two horns of a dilemma, right? It's like we're so fucked it's not worth doing anything, and we're so clever it's not worth worrying. I mean, if you fall into both of those are bullshit.
Everything I do for my ancestors and the generations to come. And when I'm not frustrated, because my ancestors are with me and they're cheering me on and they're creating opportunities of synchronicity for me to meet people, to connect people, so they are helping me move things forward. So I don't see, for me, the connection is so strong between the past and the present, that if I am present, I can harness all of those different forms of wisdom.
And I love that. And you should be at the center, which someone should just give you vast amounts of money and unlimited resources and let you get on with it. But anyway, if and when that happens to you, how do you re-find your way into being the Gabriel that we can see here, that is active and making a difference?
There's two ways. Two classic ways, and I learned actually much more about these last year in the middle of lockdown, when everything was going so crazy. I walked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, 900 kilometers, and it was an extraordinary experience. The walking was the least of it, and it helped me realize and actually name the thing that I used to get that energy, and actually reinforce it. And there's two things. One of them is you go inside. You go to the place inside where you can feel the who you are. And the other is you go outside to the friends around. I started walking the Camino de Santiago going, I walk alone. Yes. I'm not here for that. I'm not here for, and then by the end of it, I had walking with people who will be friends for life, who helped me hold up a mirror to myself. And when I looked into the mirror and could go deeper, it's a loving mirror is the most wonderful thing that anyone can ever give you. And if you look into it, you find a source of strength and power and energy and love that is really spectacular. And I'm a scientist. I ended up being a scientist, and so I'm talking woo-woo now. But it really works.
You're a
you go
woo-woo
inside.
scientist.
I'm a woo-woo scientist. You go inside and you find that sense of who you are, and you go outside to have the people who help you find that. And when you do that, you get to see the Wizard of Oz, and you find out
So
twitching curtain, there's nothing behind it.
So the urgency that one often feels, I could imagine someone's story is, Gabriel, don't waste time going inside. There's lots to fix in the world outside, but what I hear you say is you can't do the one without the other.
You can't do the one without the other. You absolutely have to have both. And I've learned that again and again and again, and now finally the message seems to be going in.
Okay, so finally we get to the point where I can ask the question that brought me up to Glasgow, which is, what do I do when I wake up in the middle of the night full of fear, anxiety, powerlessness and despair? What would my brilliant guests advise me to think or do? What's the story I could tell myself that unparalyzes me and moves me forward?
If it's evening, I'd look up at the stars and just laugh at your conceit at worrying about anything. And the other thing is, if it's daylight, look at 1 meter square of grass on a lawn, or better still in an ordinary field, and just look at it for a period of time until your eyes adjust to grassness, and then you see the insects, and then you see everything else, and just realize what a miraculous planet we live on. And if you really want to be permanently in awe, download a picture from the web, which is a picture produced by CERN, the Hadron Collider coves, and NASA, which is a picture of a single human blood cell. And when you look at that picture, even if you haven't got the comfort of religion, which I don't, whatever it is that I don't have, I feel that it is filled by my sense of awe at seeing the beautiful complexity of that blood cell, and realizing that there's so many of them inside me and inside you. And you think, God, what a trivial world I'm thinking of. This is just magic. And this is going back billions of years of development to have that lovely complexity?
I just keep doing, I feel like the ever ready bunny or something, it's just, or Dory, like, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Like, I just keep doing, I don't stop. And I think it's about, acting. I think agency is really important. And I think that's another piece of this puzzle where we just, we have so many people that just feel absolutely inept. They don't know what to do. And I think it's usually just that first step into action, which then you start to realize opens up many more actions and possibilities. And I mean, I don't know. I think I take so much solace and joy in the work that we're doing. So with Synchronicity Earth, where we're supporting, all these different partners in places like the Congo Basin and, across Asia and South America. And, these are people working locally on the ground, and they're fighting, some really complicated challenges and governments and politics and, all sorts of issues around that have cropped up from COVID and just day-to-day doing of saving an amphibian or protecting, a white-bellied heron or whatever it might be. But then the fact that they're doing that work and we're supporting them to do that work gives me so much hope. So, I feel absolutely, like, utterly not responsible, but so committed to helping them do their work that I also then have to keep going. And it's a beautiful cycle of just, of being fed by the work that I do and support, and that keeps me going and then expands, gives me the ability to expand outward and do more.
It's quite simple, actually. You get out into the field. Well, you can do two things. You get out into the field, and then we do like digging holes. Because when you dig a hole, you reveal all sorts of secret horizons, which are kind of layer cake of human endeavor, of natural cycles. It depends whether it's urban, brownfield, greenfield, whatever. And therein lies the story.
I've got a story for you.
Tell me.
Because, thinking about the green versus chrome thing and thinking about the reductions versus removals and nature, the thing that helped me get around that is I was walking in the Scottish Highlands in the summer, in May this year. I was walking for 2 weeks, and I started in Glasgow. And I remember that there was this place on the Isle of Mull that someone had told me about where they were doing some kind of carbon removals things. And I called and said, can I come visit? So I spent a day with them. The first thing we did was we went and looked at these woolly pigs that he had. Hey, piggies, he said. And these woolly pigs, they were awesome. They were great big, and aren't they gorgeous, he said, scratching their heads and stuff. It's like, why have you got this? Why have you brought me here? Well, the pigs are doing something that apparently it's the closest you can get to a native wild boar without having to get a dangerous animals license. And so that's why it's woolly pigs, and they're gorgeous. So what they do is this head-high bracken, because there's been selective grazing, so there's bracken everywhere. So the pigs go along and take all that out. And then the seed bank can come to the surface, so native trees can start to grow and take up carbon, right? That's item one on the Isle of Mull. The second thing is that they're planting trees, right? So they're planting trees native broadly, so they're actually contributing to biodiversity as well as sucking up carbon, so far so natural. But they also have machines. So they've got a machine that's taking off-cutting from wood, and it's burning it, pyrolyzing it, so the carbon gets locked up in it. You can put it in soils, you can improve the quality of the soils. It's indigenous wisdom, it's tech, it's nature, in one sweet package. And then they've also got machines that are grinding up special rock that you can spread on fields that take, all of it, all in one beautiful place. And that, you said you need to feel hope. Yeah. I sat on that hillside and I looked at the pigs briefly, and I looked at the trees growing, and I looked at the machines getting ready, and I felt hope.
I do think you should be scared and skeptical, and so I think you should dip into those stories. Like, the science is a story which is based on fact, right? But it's still a narrative which shows you why you should be scared, and the history of inaction shows you why you should be skeptical. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be everything's fine. But you shouldn't get stuck in those stories, because there's no agency, or very little agency in those stories, and there's a danger of just being stuck in despair or anger. So I think, I've obviously thought a lot about it. I think you have to choose. I think hope is an active choice, and and action is what, and hope and action are intertwined. You can't, hope without action is well, it's passive, right? I mean, you've got to be in action. So you've got to decide, okay, I'm scared and skeptical. All right, so we can bank that. But my response to that is not to be overwhelmed or dismissive, but to choose hope, which means choose to try and do something to try and make the world a better place. Do something. I mean, almost do anything, right? Whether it's with, getting if you've got kids, get them, go to the school, see if the school will join the Let's Get to Zero initiative. If you've got access to business leaders, bring it into your work. I mean, everybody's got some influence, right? If it's what you buy, what you retweet. I mean, and there's loads of great stuff out there for individuals to join now. So, but someone like you who's got a rich network of influential connections. I mean, there's a ton you could do, right? And it's a story that people want to be in now. That's the other thing. It's not 5 years ago you had to sneak round the side door and try and get in, but now people want to be in this conversation. Everyone, there's a sort of zeitgeist shift that people are like, okay, yeah, we really are fucked, and we really do need to do something about this. Help me. I want to be part of it. So I think that's helpful, right? There's a lot of that flocking, attracts people. Like, oh, what's going on over there? That everyone wants to be part of that.
So it's our last day here. It's raining, and I'm tired. And this is the bit where Andrew, our producer, tells me I need to kind of summarise what I'm learning, what we've learned. So thank you for that, Andrew. Well, here's the coffee. Thank God for that. I came up here very much looking for what the stories people tell. And one of the things I've learned is it's actually a lot more about, or it's equally important that we story listen. It's the ability to listen beyond the story. There's no one story. I'm coming away wanting to trust more in the evolutionary process. We've got to find a way of forgiving ourselves for making the mistakes to discover the new things. So I think it was Jessica who talked about when you're down, just take action. The vast numbers of the people on the world get this. They want a healthy world. They want to go just beyond net carbon. They don't just want to remove the problem. They want to go beyond and heal the problem. That gives you agency. And so I'm really, really pleased we're doing this. I don't envy the editor. Bringing in some living foliage, very appropriate for COP26.
26.
COP26! It's been really joyous. It's been really good fun to do this. I'm going to say hello to the viewers at home and explain why we're having tea together.
You look just like a kind of Leninist student from '68. It's great.
Brilliant, so you take one.
Don't worry, I keep being tested.
We talked about it earlier. It's not cool, it's bougie. And we can go back to it's bougie.
I asked them for a studio, but it was a yoga studio. And thank you for inspiring. I mean, really, now my mind is really...
Great.
Now I'm not sleeping for different reasons. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Let's eat.
Yes. I can have my kombucha.
How did it feel? That's great.
So relaxed.
That was so funny.
I'm leaving Glasgow full of gratitude, actually. And I think one of the big things that's standing in the way is people feel alone. There's massive value in being together. With the earth, we're in this together, the earth's in it as well. So we're in this together, we're not alone. Whatever anyone may tell you, between two friends. What next?